What's up, everybody? It's FYGP, and today we've got a very interesting video about the rise of the American technocracy and how democracy is being done away with. Essentially, the charade of democracy is being done away with because real democracy never existed in the first place. But now, even the fake phony votes that you cast are not going to matter even because in the future, your officials are going to be there for life. And those mouthpieces for the oligarchy and for the corporate interests are going to be there for life, such as the Venetian Doge, for example, was elected for life by a select circle of rich people in Venice, in the Republic of Venice. So this is the model that these people such as Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, Sam Altman, Larry Ellison, Elon Musk, this is what they're aiming for. They're aiming for an open technocracy, an open American technocracy where, there is virtually no distinction between government and corporation. So the lines between government and corporation are already so blurred, but they're going to be even more blurred once, for example, Palantir institutes its digital panopticon surveillance system on all of the United States. So this is the plans that they have in the work. This is all fact right now. I am talking off the top of my head right now, but this is all well-researched fact. And, we can go to the writings of Curtis Yarvin, who serves as an inspiration for many of these so-called tech oligarchs, right? So Curtis Yarvin's plot against America, it's from the New Yorker, but I mean, it's an interesting article. It just came out a couple of months ago. So his name on the blog was essentially Moldbug. And what he wrote about in his, writing, Mencius Moldbug posted a serial manifesto under the heading An Open Letter to Open-Minded Progressives. So Moldbug contended it was due to the influence of the media and the economy which worked together, however unwittingly, to perpetuate a left liberal consensus. So what he calls the media and essentially the academia and all of these institutions, they were put together under Curtis Yarvin as a umbrella term, under the umbrella term of the cathedral. So he refers to all of these institutions, be they, media, NGOs, perhaps government-funded institutions, or academia. He refers to that as the cathedral, which essentially sets the compass for a society, how to function. And he's saying that there is a left liberal consensus that is perpetuated by it, perhaps unwittingly. So his solution is nothing less than destruction and the total reboot of social order. So where do we see that? It's straight from the Masonic motto, Ordo ab Chao. You must understand that this is the principles that people like this operate under. So they're going to destroy this current system to form a new system, which is even going to be more totalitarian, in which there is going to be even more surveillance, in which personal freedoms are going to be even more limited. They're going to destroy this current system, which is already massively repressive, obviously in a hidden way because we have democracy. But no, they're going to completely do away with this charade, and they're actually just going to institute open, he calls it neo-monarchy. I would call it tech-oligarchy. It's a better term because they're not monarchs. I don't think that, Peter Thiel's son is going to inherit it, so much. There's going to be different functionaries that are going to, switch in, and there's not going to be dynastic monarchies such as in old Europe. No, it's going to be tech oligarchs that run things that have powers like a monarch. So the executive power will be expanded severely. which is, I think, which we see happening right now. I mean, how many executive orders is Trump signing right now? I mean, it's insane. And of course, they're going to do away completely with any sort of freedoms. I truly believe that, as as flawed as the founding fathers were, one of the major things that they wrote down in the Constitution is that the rights are given by God, meaning that no government can take away those rights from the people. That's all going to be done away with. The United States as it existed until today, pretty much under a Republican system, it's going to be done away with. This fake, phony charade of democracy, which we have witnessed since perhaps JFK's assassination and so on. This is going to be done away with. They're just going to institute total open totalitarianism, essentially what it amounts to. He proposed the liquidation of democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law. So this is what I was saying. The Constitution, they're going to do away with that. And the eventual transfer of power to a CEO-in-chief, someone like Steve Jobs or Mark Andreessen, who would transform the government into a heavily armed, ultra-profitable corporation. So yeah, that's what it is. And essentially, as I mentioned before, the merger between the state and the corporate entities. And how is this distinguishable from fascism? I do not know. I mean, there's a lot of fascist elements in it, because the core principle of fascism, which people tend to forget, is the merger of state and corporate interests, aligning them. In Hitler's Germany, which was obviously National Socialist, not fascist, but they had a specific term for it in German. It was called Gleichschaltung, which means adjustment to the same. I don't know how to translate it to English, but synchronization would be perhaps the best translation for that. So they want to synchronize government and corporate interests to be essentially the same, and that they both aim at the same sort of goals. We see that happening right now. We have seen this happening throughout the 2000s and 2010s, and now coming into the 2020s, this trend is on complete overdrive. You see it obviously with the pharmaceutical industry, with Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, where we were forced an experimental vaccine that was under emergency use authorization, that did by all means not go through all of the clinical trials, obviously. So you see that merger obviously with the big sort of pharmaceutical mafia. You also see it, of course, in the financial and banking sector. That merger has been around ever since the creation of the Fed in 1913. You see it as a merger of the defense industrial complex, as they like to call it, even though I like to call it the invasion industrial complex, or the genocide industrial complex is a much more accurate term. This is evident there. I mean, companies such as Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, so on, they have so much influence within the government, and their interests are being, the government's interests and their interests are often streamlined to be the same. So this is what fascism looks like, for lack of a better term. So Curtis Yarvin is essentially just advocating for fascism and using new terms to make it seem more appealable. Oh, wouldn't you like to have a CEO in chief, right? Wouldn't you like to have a guy who is actually qualified, who can take care of all these matters, and not some guy who you randomly elect every 4 years? Wouldn't you want a guy to be in power for much longer, so that he can actually accomplish things within his perhaps lifetime, instead of switching your puppet every 4 years? That is what Curtis Yarvin is getting at, right? This new regime would sell off public schools, destroy universities, abolish the press, and imprison decivilized populations. It would also fire civil servants en masse, a policy Mohlberg later called rage, retire all government employees, and discontinue international relations, including security guarantees, foreign aid, and mass immigration. So you can see a lot of overlap here. Obviously, we have Trump and the Trump administration going after universities for the whole Palestine issue. Obviously, Trump being a massive Zionist. So, yeah, the funding to all these things that are mentioned above is being cut, obviously. And, I'm usually all for cutting this, but what is going to come in place of all of this is a complete corporate-ruled digital panopticon that is going to enslave humanity even more than in the previous system. You got to understand that. And all of your social security nets that perhaps, you could barely rely upon in the United States. I mean, you can't really rely upon them. But in Europe, there's lots of good social security programs, and all that. So they're going to do away with that. You're going to be completely left on the street with this. And good luck finding a good education or good jobs with all of these institutions being abolished, obviously. Molbach acknowledged that his vision depended on the sanity of his chief executive. Clearly, if he or she turns out to be a Hitler or Stalin, we would just have recreated Nazism or Stalinism. Well, yeah, you are essentially doing that. I mean, you are creating a new version of corporate fascism. It's a corporate dictatorship. It's if you read what fascist thinkers such as Gabriele D'Annunzio were writing about, and what Curtis Yarvin is writing about, it's very similar. It's eerily similar. If Molbach's open letter showed little affection for the masses, it initiated that they might still have a use. Communism was not overthrown by Andrei Sakov, Joseph Brodsky, and Václav Havel, he wrote. What was needed was the combination of philosopher and crowds. The best place to recruit the crowd, he said, was on the internet. A shrewd intuition. Before long, links to Molbach's blog, unqualified reservations were being passed around by libertarian techies, disgruntled bureaucrats, and self-styled rationalists, many of them of whom had formed the shock troops of an online intellectual movement that came to be known as Neo-Reaction or the Dark Enlightenment. So yeah, he calls this movement the Dark Enlightenment. While few turned out to be outright monarchists, their concept for Obama-era uplift seemed to find a voice in Molbach's heresies. In his most influential coinage, which quickly gained currency among the nascent alt-right, Molbach used his readers to rouse themselves from their ideological slumber by taking the red pill, like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. But obviously, that is a very common trope within the so-called truther community, the red pill, obviously. But it's Curtis Yarvin, or Malicious Molbach, whatever the fuck his blogger name is. He did not come up with that. Just like most of the concepts he did not come up with. Like, there's barely anything new here. These things have been said by many thinkers before him, and most of them happen to be fascists. So, yeah, essentially what we are heading into is a corporate tech-oligarchy that is essentially amounts to total fascism because the merger between state and corporation is going to be done away with. Now, why even hide it? Why even hide it? The United States is essentially already a tech oligarchy. So why even have this fake phony charade? Why not just bring in King Donald or King JD? King JD maybe perhaps might be the new Caesar. I don't think he has the charisma for it, but we'll see. Perhaps the tech oligarchs that financed him can even build that personality up for him. But again, I think there has to be a guy with more charisma who can become the new American Caesar which will destroy the American democracy in the coming future. So yeah, this is the first part of it. So why do I say that this is virtually, the writings of Gabriele D'Annunzio? And if you just compare the two, if you compare what Gabriele D'Annunzio around 100 years ago was writing, which is the ideological forefather of Italian fascism, and what Curtis Yarvin is writing about, it's virtually the same text, except there's some different terms being used for the same things. So what Gabriele D'Annunzio instituted in modern day Rijeka. Let me just pull up my notes from the book. So while he did not propose a formal merger of state and corporation, neither is Curtis Yarvin. He's not saying that they should formally merge. He said, Gabriele D'Annunzio said that in his Fiume experiment, which is the city of Rijeka in modern-day Croatia, an avant-garde now essentially what an avant-garde of all cases of society, be they, from the arts, from military, from public offices, or so on, or perhaps even the revolutionary political visionaries, they are to become the noble people, which he terms in that way, and they will be warriors and producers opposing the liberal elites. This is what Gabriele D'Annunzio was writing about 100 years ago, and you see that this is essentially the same thing as Curtis Yarvin. And opposing the liberal elites, the establishment, the Italian Regency in Carnaro, which was close to Rijeka. So do away with the old system, essentially, is what Gabriele D'Annunzio also wanted, and building something new from the scratch. So Ordre Apkeo, I think Ordre Apkeo applies perfectly to Curtis Yarvin, because I do believe that this is all just a, for lack of a better term, a Masonic design in some sort of ways, because they always use the Masonic motto, Ordre Apkeo, order from chaos, to institute new societies and do away with the old, which is not working anymore, obviously. This liberalist democracy is not working anymore. So they're going to do away with the charade of it, and they're just going to openly, put out those tech oligarchs, which are going to rule over all of us. So, what else do we have about D'Annunzio from my notes when I was reading him? So, he was for blurring the lines between the state, the collective will, and individual artistic expression. So he chose Rijeka. He took over Rijeka for this experiment. It was called Fiume in Italian. And you had for essentially 5 years, or 4 years actually, you had the free state of Fiume, which was just 28 square kilometers. Obviously, it's just a city. And essentially it gained autonomy, well, back then under the Austro-Hungarian Empire and so on, but that's besides the point. So in 1920, in the Treaty of Rapallo, the Kingdom of Serbs, Slovenes, and Croats, they agreed to Fiume being an independent entity. They even had their own currency. Obviously, you can see that. And what was this free state look like? Well, obviously, there was a lot of turmoil, obviously. too long to go through all of that, obviously. But what was the effects from this experiment? Obviously, let's take a look at the effects of this. So the avant-garde and politics, the nuncio's role in Fiume was marked by a commitment to uniting avant-garde artistic principles with political action. So again, I think that's highlighted in Curtis Yarvin, where he says that the academia, the media, the arts have all been taken over by liberals, and we need to sort of take back the cathedral, is what he's saying in his writings, if I am interpreting this correctly. But he's essentially saying that the cathedral, which he calls all of these institutions that I already previously mentioned, this thing is what gives society its compass, and unwittingly perhaps they have had a liberal bias, so there needs to be a correction in that, and all of these institutions also need to be removed, at least severely limited, or if not outright removed. So yeah, but D'Annunzio did not want to remove perhaps as many institutions, but what he wanted was these noble people to utilize their commitment to avant-garde to go for political action. And he envisioned the state as a work of art itself. So who were these noble people? They were comprised of warriors and producers united against perceived corrupt liberal elites and socialist movements. So I'm sure that Curtis Yarvin has very similar noble people, right? I mean, he doesn't call them the noble people, but he says that there's going to be an American Caesar, and obviously there's going to be a bunch of people supporting that American Caesar, and they're going to align with, his principles, and they're going to be opposed to liberal elites and socialist movements. You can just copy paste the text, and you see that Curtis Yarvin actually didn't come up with anything original. And Gabriele D'Annunzio used actually Fiume as a laboratory, and it was a radical social and political experiment to see if fascism can withstand. He also came up with the concept of charismatic authority, and called himself Il Duce, which was obviously then a term that was later adopted by Benito Mussolini. Embodied a fusion of personal will and collective identity, shaping a community through charisma and the force of personality. This is, again, American Caesarism. This is Trump to some degree. This is what is going to come after Trump, because we're quite clear. The American Caesar is going to come. They're going to do away with this charade of democracy very soon. And you can see it accelerating and accelerating. So, this is one vision for the future. This is the Curtis Yarvin vision for the future. This is the neo-fascist vision for the future. Now you also have the Fabian socialist vision for the future, for lack of a better term, which is essentially the WEF agenda, zero growth policies, austerity, negative birth rates, endless social tensions, endless culture war. But you also have this vision for the future. So these are, I would say, two competing visions for the future. And I believe that right now, the tech-oligarch vision has the upper hand, as opposed to the Malthusian WEF agenda vision. But both of them are equally as bad, and both of them are going to enslave humanity. What did Gabriele D'Annunzio write about nationalism and empire? So he was driven obviously by a fervent Italian nationalism and the desire to expand the influence of Italy, and he obviously drew from historical and modern examples from Italian history, sort of creating a national mythos. So this is also, I think, where this vision of tech oligarchs and Curtis Yarvin and, this fascist influences, because he's just copying, Gabriele D'Annunzio. I mean, there's nothing original with Curtis Yarvin's writings. Really, there's nothing. What they're going to do is, on the outside, they're going to pretend that they are this great force for nationalism and for patriotism. You see it obviously with Trump. He's always this fake nationalism to rile people up and so on. But in the end, he's just selling out America to Israel, obviously. I mean, amongst many other things, obviously, and to big tech oligarchs, obviously, he's selling out the United States. So there's no patriotism involved. But the veneer, the sort of charade of nationalism will be brought back. You will have more conservative, I guess, views on empire and nationalism, as opposed to the liberal one world, one people, one whatever, one race, this race mixing liberal mass migration policies that we have had in the past 20 years. They might, slow that down a bit and perhaps resort to the old and tried and tested method of riling the people up by nationalism. You see that with Trump every day. I mean, he's always stoking the tensions between left and right and so on, and so is the left. Obviously, it's just divide and conquer tactics, obviously, but to some degree they're bringing back this strong American nationalism, which will be misused, obviously. The proto-fascist elements. I mean, Gabriele D'Annunzio being essentially the founding father of Italian fascism. It adopted the practices of this proto-fascism in the city of Rijeka, or Fiume as it's called in Italian. And actually, also what is interesting is that Gabriele D'Annunzio was the guy to bring back the Roman salute, right? He was the guy who actually, brought back the Roman salute. And uniformed militias and black shirts were running around. I mean, you will have that very soon in Trump's America as well. I mean, it's not far-fetched to believe so, because with recent events, which I will not talk about on my channel because I want to be able to travel in the near future. Obviously, these most recent events, this ASS event of a major political commentator, it's going to be used to rally the right to be more militant, to actually clamp down on free speech, to call for essentially the same things that the woke mob, as they like to call it, called for just a couple of years before. So you see Jimmy Fallon being fired, for example, for what was actually the truth, what he said. I mean, Trump is not to get into the daily politics too much, but just know as so much that this woke right, I mean, what I essentially like to call it woke right, because they get triggered by all kinds of things and demand the banning and firing of people, just like the woke left does. No, they're gonna be the black shirts of the future. They're gonna shut down dissenting opinions, absolutely, and they're gonna do away with the Constitution, as Curtis Yarvin said. There's not gonna be any free speech. No, you're gonna live under total totalitarianism. So he also wanted to aestheticize politics, is what Gabriele D'Annunzio wanted. And I think you see that a lot in this sort of new right movement, where we have all of these cool, fancy edits of, these based edits and so on. So the aestheticism absolutely is there with, this wolves in the sheep clothing administration. Hey, they need a charismatic leader who blends aesthetics and politics, is what Gabriele D'Annunzio was saying. So, turning a city into a personal canvas and inspiring future movements. Yes. What did Fiume end up to be? Well, in the end, it didn't didn't amount to much, but the ideas lived on, obviously. So just to highlight that what sources I'm using, this is the book I read about Gabriele D'Annunzio the past month, basically. It's a really good book. It highlights all of the elements of his ideology and the influences he had on Mussolini. He was also the godfather to Mussolini. He was also a poet and a national hero. So yeah. Godfather to Mussolini, national hero of Italy, and World War One irredentist movement, literary icon of Joyce and Pound, lover of actress Eleonora Duse. Here is Lucy Hughes Hallett's extraordinary biography of Gabriele D'Annunzio, poet, bon vivant, harbinger of Italian fascism. Gabriele D'Annunzio was Italy's premier poet at the time when poetry mattered enough to trigger riots. A brilliant self-publicist in the first age of the mass media, he used his fame to sell his works, seduce women, and promote his extreme nationalism. In 1915, D'Annunzio, incendiary oratory helped drive Italy to enter the First World War, in which he achieved heroic status as an aviator. In 1919, he led a troop of mutineers into the Croatian port of Fiume, and there, a delinquent city-state, futurist, anarchist, communists, and proto-fascists descended onto the city. So did literary and thrill-seekers, drug dealers, and prostitutes. After 15 months, an Italian gunship brought the regime to an end. But the adventure had its sequel. 3 years later, the fascists marched on Rome, belting out anthems they'd learned from Fiume, as Mussolini consciously modeled himself after the great poet. At once an aesthete and militarist, D'Annunzio wrote with equal enthusiasm about Fourtenoy goes and torpedoes, and enjoyed making love on beds, stews with rose palettes as much as risking death as an aviator. So very good book, very interesting biography on Gabriele D'Annunzio. Really lots of things I learned from the book. I can recommend this book to anyone. So let's continue with what Curtis Yarvin had to say, and stepping in the footsteps of Gabriele D'Annunzio, Curtis Yarvin writes very similar things. I'm just pull up the New Yorker article I had before, if I can find it. So here we go. I found it. So yeah, for Moldbach, any system that sought legitimacy in the passions of the mob was doomed to instability. Though critics labeled him a techno-fascist, he preferred to call himself a royalist or a Jacobite, a nod to partisans of James II and his descendants who in the 17th and 18th century opposed the British parliamentary system and upheld the divine right of kings. Never mind the French Revolution, the bête noire of reactionary thinkers, Moldberg believed that the English and American revolutions had gone too far. Yeah, interesting. But then again, that does not make him a monarchist, because the current system that we live under is essentially modeled after the French Revolution, and even with the two-party system in the United States, you have a certain overlap between the two predominant parties within revolutionary France, which were the Girondins, which, for lack of time, I'm just going to compare it to the Republicans, which were the more conservative revolutionary wing, and you had the Jacobins, which were obviously the radical left in America. Obviously, right now they were quite radical. They murdered lots of people. But the Girondins, they were also for their ideology. They also perpetuated revolutionary ideology, and all modern systems. The whole system of the Republic is modeled after the French Revolution. So when the foundation is already there, you can't really strive too much from it. So how realistic is it to bring back, dynastic monarchies with absolute rule of the king's divine right, so to say, that their power was given to gods, by gods to the kings, right? It's not realistic in a 21st century America, but what is realistic is a tech oligarchy and techno-fascism, which his critics call him. So this is essentially what he ends up being. It's not, perhaps he can claim as much as he wants to be a royalist or a Jacobite. No, the foundations of the United States are already built upon the French Revolution. And those foundations are not going to be done away with. There's going to be still the Jacobins and the Girondins, the Republicans and the Democrats, the same nonsense two-party, fake left-right paradigm. Absolutely there is. And there's not going to be some sort of divine right monarch that rules and actually puts his son into the position afterwards. That's, I think, very unrealistic for the 21st century. But what is realistic is a techno-fascism. So, yeah. In a 2013 article on the news site TechCrunch, cited Geeks for Monarchy, revealed that Mencius Moldbug was the cyber alias of a 40-year-old programmer in San Francisco named Curtis Yarvin. At the same time that he was trying to redesign the U.S. government, Yarvin was also dreaming up a new computer operating system that he hoped would serve as a digital republic. He founded a company that he named Tlon for the Borges story, Tlön Ukbar Orbis Tertius, I don't know what that is, in which a secret society describes an elaborate parallel world that begins to overtake reality. As he raised money for his startup, Yarvin became a kind of Machiavelli to his big tech benefactors, who shared his view that the world would be better off if they were in charge, obviously, yeah. Tlon's investors included the venture capital firms Andreessen Horowitz and Founders Fund, the latter of which was started by billionaire Peter Thiel. So that's where the Peter Thiel connection comes in. Both Thiel and Balaji Srivinsan were the general partner of Andreessen Horowitz, had become friends with Yarvin after reading his blog. Through email shared with me revealed that neither was thrilled to be publicly associated with him at the time. How dangerous is that we are being linked? Thiel wrote to Yarvin in 2014. One reassuring thought, one of our hidden advantages is that these people, social justice warriors, wouldn't believe in a conspiracy if it hit them over the head. So yeah, essentially making fun about the naivete of the American public, which always dismisses conspiracies as something that never happens when they happen all the time, right? It's not. And this sort of philosophy, this sort of world outlook has been promoted by intelligence services. I mean, the CIA itself came up actually with the term conspiracy theorist as a combat term to discredit dissenting opinions. So, a decade on, with the Trumpian right embracing strongman rule, Yarvin links to elites in Silicon Valley and Washington's are no longer a secret, so he's linked to them. In a 2021 appearance on the 4Eyed podcast, Vice President J.D. Vance, a former employee of one of Thiel's venture capital firms, cited Yarvin when struggling, suggesting that a future Trump administration fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people, and ignore the courts if they objected. Mark Andreessen, one of the heads of Andreessen Horowitz, and the informal advisor to the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, has started quoting his good friend Yarvin about the need for a founder-like figure to take charge of our out-of-control bureaucracy. Yes, so they always provide the problem, which in this case is absolutely real. It's a out of control bureaucracy. But then they come in with the reaction, obviously, which is happening right now, which we see right now, where most people see the system for what it is and want it to be done away with. But then they will swoop in with the solution, which is going to be this techno-fascism. No, it's not going to be a monarchy. It's going to be tech-fascism. It's exactly what it's going to be. It's not going to be King Peter Thiel and his son running, after him, succeeding him. No, it's going to be Peter Thiel and then perhaps, Sam Altman and then Larry Ellens or whoever, the oligarchs of the future, you know what I'm saying. So, yeah, Andrew Closter, the new general counsel of the government's Office of Personnel Management, said that replacing civil servants with loyalists could help Trump defeat the cathedral, a term that was specifically made up by Curtis Yarvin. There are figures who channel a zeitgeist. Nietzsche calls them timely men, and Curtis is definitely a timely man. A State Department official who has been reading Yarvin since the Moldbug era told me. Back in 2011, Yarvin said that Trump was one of the two figures who seemed biologically suited to be an American monarch. The other was Chris Christie. I don't know, I think like Chris Christie is better suited to be like the king of fucking Burger King or fucking Pizza Hut than to be an actual American monarch, but that is beside the point. In 2022, he recommended that Trump, if re-elected, appoint Elon Musk to run the executive branch. Oh yeah. Yeah, this was straight up an idea coming from Curtis Yarvin. On a podcast with his friend Michael Anton, now the director of policy planning at the State Department, Yarvin argued that the institutions of civil society such as Harvard would need to be shut down. The idea that you're going to be a Caesar with someone else's department of reality in operation is just manifestly absurd, he said. So, yeah. Interesting. In another timeline, Yarvin might have remained an obscure and ineffectual internet clank, a digital mystère. Instead, he has become one of America's most influential illiberal thinkers, an engineer for the intellectual source code for the second Trump administration. Yarvin has pushed the Overton window. Nick Palcy, a history professor at NYU, told me, his work has revived ideas that once seemed outside the boundaries of polite society. Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's essentially fascism. Singh said and created a roadmap for the dismantling of the administrative state and the global post-war order. Absolutely. As his ideas. Now, do those things need to be abolished? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they do need to be abolished, but not if they're being replaced by something that is 10 times worse, right? As his ideas have been serialized in Dodge, and Trump has taken to self-identifying as a king, one might expect to find Yarvin as in an exultant mood. In fact, he has spent the past few months fretting with the moment will go to waste. Fretting that the moment will go to waste. If you have a Trump boner right now, enjoy it, he wrote 2 days after the election. It's as hard as you will ever get when many... Yeah, so that's a level of intellectual discourse that this man provides, right? What many see as the most dangerous assault on American democracy in the nation's history, Yarvin dismisses as woefully insufficient a vibes coup. So no, not enough authoritarianism for Curtis Yarvin, seems like. Without a full-blown autocratic takeover, he believes a backlash is sure to follow. When I spoke to him recently, he quoted the words of Louis de Saint-Just, the French philosopher who championed the reign of terror. He who makes half a revolution digs his own grave. Oh yeah, this is really fascinating that he's quoting one of the most radical French revolutionaries that was in part responsible for the reign of terror, which killed more people in 100 days than the king had killed in 100 years. And that he says he who makes half a revolution digs his own grave. Now, yeah, Louis de Saint-Just was a radical Jacobin philosopher. Like, he wasn't even a Girondin. He was a Jacobin. He was on the far left at the time, right? So you can see that the foundations of many of these people's worldviews, they actually go back to the French Revolution, and they cannot stray far from the either Girondin or Jacobin ideologies, which were prevalent at the time, even though they might call themselves Jacobins, because monarchists, excuse me, because a true monarchist, he would not be in favor of revolution. The whole idea of monarchy is, you know, continuously. It's stability. It's not flux. It's not, overthrow of systems. No, it's actually the preservation of the system. So that is very, very weird for a so-called monarchist to quote radical Jacobins and talk about a revolution. So earlier this year, Yarvin and I had lunch in Washington, D.C., where he had come to celebrate the regime change. He was in his usual getup, blue jeans, Chelsea boots, a rumpled dress shirt under a motorcycle jacket. After taking a few bites of a cheeseburger topped with crispy onions, he pushed his plate away. Last year, he explained he'd decided to start taking an Ozempic-like drug after a debate with a right-wing commentator, Richard Hanina, about the relative merits of monarchy and democracy. I destroyed him in almost every way, Yarvin said, nudging a tomato with his fork. But he had one huge advantage, which was that I was fat and he was not. The injections seemed to be working as I ate. Yarvin's phone filled with messages, some of them complimenting his glow up. That morning, the Times magazine had published an interview with him, accompanied by a moody black and white portrait. Until recently, Yarvin had his frazzled curtain of shoulder-length hair and ill-fitted wardrobe had seemed indifferent to his appearance. Now wearing his leather jacket, he glared out at the reader through stylishly tousled hair. His friend Steve Saylor, a writer for white nationalist websites, said he looked like the fifth Ramon. Reference. In person, as in print, Yarvin expresses himself with the imperious self-assurance. He is nearly impossible to interrupt. When the rabbi is speaking, let the rabbi speak. Razib Khan, a right-wing science blogger and a close friend of Yarvin, told me. Even his friends and family, however, acknowledge that he has a room to grow as a communicator. He talks in a halting monotone, rarely answers questions directly, and is prone to disorienting asides. In the middle of saying one thing, he is getting distracted by something else that he could be saying, like a GPS that keeps suggesting fast routes. Yarvin, for his part, was relieved at how the interview with the Times had gone. My main goal was, how do I not damage my relationships? He said. For years, Yarvin was best known at the extent that he was known at all. As the court philosopher of the Tealverse, the network of heterodox entrepreneurs, intellectuals, and hangers-on surrounding the tech mogul. So that is what he has become. Now, he mentioned that a businessman he had once complimented to a journalist. He mentioned that a businessman he had once complimented to a journalist that Thiel had not invested enough money in his company. I don't know what kind of sentence this is. That's one strike and you're out, and he's out, Yarvin said, slightly theatrically. His second goal, he said, was to reach the Times audience. This seemed surprising. He has called for the government to shut down his paper. I tend to be more interested in outreach to people who share my own cultural background, Yarvin explained. He likes to tell the story his parental grandparents, Jewish communists from Brooklyn. Oh, interesting. Wow. Like, why is it that all of these right-wing thinkers always have some sort of communist uh, come up, right? A socialist or communist background in their early years. That's very interesting. I mean, you can just go to the whole American neoconservative movement, which were essentially Trotskyites when they were in college. So, similar with Curtis Yarvin, who comes from a Jewish, from a family of Jewish communists from Brooklyn. No, he's actually now gonna switch to the right side of to the right and not to the left anymore. He's gonna abandon the left. I mean, he abandoned it probably a long time ago, but it's interesting how all of these right-wingers, they all come from, in the beginning, they originate from leftist circles. It's always interesting. So he has less to say about his maternal grandparents, Trayton Wasps, with a cottage in Nantucket. So, I guess also what is interesting about this Trumpian right is that they're all, for lack of a better term, Zionists, Jewish supremacists would be another term perhaps that would be fitting in this context, because I think that's more of an accurate description of Curtis Yarvin. But yeah, they are very loyal to the state of Israel for some reason as well. And Curtis Yarvin, I don't know his exact views on Israel, but I'm sure that he has no problem with it. The vibe of American communism was, we've got 30 IQ points on these people and we are going to win, he said. It's like, what if your gifted kids formed a political party and tried to take over the world? Yarvin's parents met in Brown, where his father, Herbert, was pursuing a PhD in philosophy. After finishing school and failing to get tenure, too arrogant, Yarvin said, Herbert tried his hand at writing the grand American novel, then joined the Foreign Service as a diplomat. In the following years, the family lived in the Dominican Republic and Cyprus. Herbert was cynical about working for the government, and Yarvin seemed to have inherited his disdain. He repeatedly proposed closing American embassies, and a prospect the State Department is now considering in parts of Europe and Africa. Yarvin is reticent on the subject of his childhood, but friends and family suggest to me that his father could be harsh, domineering, and impossible to please. He controlled their life with an iron fist. Someone with close knowledge to the family told me it was absolutely his domain. Yarvin vehemently rejected this view, saying that people who are controlling tend to be insecure, and that is very much not my father. Better words to describe him that would be stubborn, intense, and formidable, like a good manager. So I'm not going to take everything from this article as gospel. I mean, it's for me, the personal life of Curtis Yarvin, it's not too fascinating. I mean, it's interesting his background that he came from. So obviously a family that was very politically engaged, that had ambitions in political life and so on. So that's very interesting. Growing up, Yarvin was sometimes homeschooled by his mother and skipped 3 grades. His older brother Norman skipped 4. The family eventually moved to Columbia, Maryland, where Yarvin entered high school as a 12-year-old sophomore. When you're much younger than your classmates, you're either an adorable mascot or a weird, threatening, disturbing alien. He attended the University Center for Talented Youth at a summer camp for gifted children and was a Baltimore area champion on its academic, a television trivia show. Andrew Cohn, a software engineer who currently lives in a spare room in Yarvin's home, told me that Yarvin's childhood seems to have left him with a lifelong feeling of inadequacy. I think that he has this sense of being not good enough, that he's seen as a ridiculous or small, and that the only way is to perform. Yarvin went to Brown, graduated at 18, and then entered the PhD program in computer science at the University of California. So definitely a really smart man. I mean, to be able to graduate college and then enter a PhD program at such a young age, that's impressive, I guess. Former peers told me that he wore a bicycle helmet in class and seemed eager to show off his knowledge to the professor. Oh, you mean helmet heads? One said when asked about Yarvin. The joke among some of his classmates was that the helmet prevented new ideas from penetrating his mind. He found more of a community on Usenet, a precursor to today's online forums. But even in groups like Talk Bazaar, where intellectual peacocking was the norm, he stood out for his desire to dominate. Although with posting jokes, advice, light verse and flames, blistering takedowns of other users, he maintained a kill file, a list of members he had blocked because he found their posts uninteresting. He wanted to be viewed as a smart guy, that he that was really important to him. His first girlfriend, Meredith Tanner, told me she was drawn to Yarvin after reading one of his virtuistic flames, and the pair dated for 2 years. Don't get involved with someone just because you're inspired by how creatively they insult people, she warned. It will turn that skill on you. Yeah, so I don't know, I got all this personal stuff. I mean, it paints a picture of what kind of man he is, but for the bigger picture, this is not really that relevant. Let's take a look. Yarvin traces his own red pill moment to the presidential election of 2004, as many of his peers were being driven to the left by the lies of WMDs and so on. Yarvin was pulled to the opposite direction by fabrications of a different sort, the swift boat conspiracy theory pushed by veterans, allied with George W. Bush campaign. I don't remember that. I was like a kid back then, so conspiracy. I don't know what that is. Let's look at it. Okay. Okay. So yeah. I guess the WMD story was really a bigger thing, but yeah. See, I don't even remember this. Let's go back. Oh yeah, they actually explained it. Who claimed that the Democratic candidate John Kerry had lied about his service in Vietnam? I think that's probably true, right? But that's just a small conspiracy. Like, the WMD story was much bigger and much more influential on world events than this thing. It seemed obvious to Yarvin, who believed the accusation that once the truth emerged, Kerry would be forced to drop out of the race. Wow, this article is really fucking long. We're gonna be here for a long time. So I suggest I'm gonna pack this up in one video right now, and we'll come back to it in the next video. But there's lots of information on here, lots of it probably not as relevant. I mean, the personal life of Curtis Yarvin is not really that interesting. But the whole agenda is to institute American technocracy, and I think we have proven this beyond the shadow of a doubt on this podcast. See you guys another time. It's FYGP shooting out.